The battle had ended in a scream. Not a battle cry, not a victorious cheer, but a scream that echoed through the ruins of Hogwarts, like a dying breath. The castle lay broken beneath the smoky sky, its once hallowed towers, now jagged shadows clawing at the clouds. The grounds were soaked in ash and blood, the forbidden forest crackling in places with residual fire, and the air charged with a magic so dark it seemed to hang in the lungs. Never felt like air again. Voldemort had won. The Elder Wand rested in his hand, as if it had always belonged there. Its allegiance never shifted to Harry, not even in that final moment in the Great Hall, when their spells collided. The truth, revealed too late, was that Snape's death had meant nothing. The wand had belonged to Draco Malfoy, and Draco, frightened and frozen, had been standing at the edge of the battle, his loyalty uncertain, and his power unclaimed. When Voldemort struck Draco down with a single curse cold, and almost casual, wand had made its final choice. Harry had tried to fight on, even without the wand's allegiance. He cast every spell he could, pulling the remnants of Dumbledore's army and the Order around him like a dying star collecting light. But it had not been enough. Hermione fell beside the shattered statue of the boar at the entrance to the Great Hall. Ron was taken by a burst of green light. In the corridor where they'd once fled from a troll in first year, Neville, brave and bloodied, tried to reach Nagini and was caught mid-lunge, the sword of Gryffindor clattering uselessly to the ground beside his body. And Harry, he survived. Not because he was the chosen one, not because of love or prophecy, or the trace of Lily's protection still echoing in his blood. He survived because Voldemort wanted him to. The Dark Lord stood over him, the Elder Wand casting shadows across his face, and whispered a binding spell, old as the stones beneath their feet. Harry felt it burn into his skin and deeper, coiling around his soul. He was held not with chains, but with magic so heavy it made standing feel like dragging mountains behind him. Voldemort's voice, cold and slick, told him he would live. Not as a martyr, not as a hero, but as a warning. A ghost of hope crushed beneath the weight of true power. In the months that followed, the wizarding world changed. The Ministry was reshaped in Voldemort's image, its name replaced by the Obsidian Court. The new order was ruled not by laws, but by fear, surveillance, and the cult of blood. Pure-blooded families were elevated to roles of governance. Muggle-borns were enslaved or vanished entirely. The Daily Prophet became a scroll of propaganda. And Hogwarts, the beating heart of the magical world, was reborn as the moribund institute of magical excellence. Its gates, once carved with the welcoming message of hope and learning, now bore a single word, scorched into black iron: submit. Their young witches and wizards were no longer taught spells of defense or the ethics of power. They learned domination, punishment, obedience. The unforgivable curses were the foundation of the curriculum. Detention meant blood offerings, and failure was not a mark on parchment, but a sentence that could end in screams no one outside the dungeon would ever hear. Harry was presumed dead. The official record claimed he had been executed during the final cleansing of Hogwarts. Voldemort's design was brilliant in its cruelty. There would be no grave, no relic, no place of mourning, only a name etched into forbidden memory. But Harry was not dead. In the belly of London, beneath the crumbling underground, and deeper still, through walls hidden by Muggle forgetfulness charms, a heartbeat of resistance pulsed in the dark. They called themselves the Lantern. The name was chosen not for what they were, but for what they refused to let daylight: memory, defiance. Harry was not their leader, at least not in name. He went by Ash, a name pulled from the fires of his past, and only a few knew his truth. His face had changed, roughened by time and battle, scarred in places where spells had grazed and healing had never come clean. His eyes still held that bright green, but they no longer glowed with boyhood wonder. They burned with something slower, deeper, a grief that did not weep, a resolve that did not bend. He trained children who had escaped the Institute hollow-eyed and trembling, but not broken. He taught them not just spells, but remembrance. The names of those who had died. The sound of laughter before the world had gone gray. And sometimes, at night, when the tunnels were quiet and his watch was long, he would speak to the dead. Not aloud, not with magic, but inward, where guilt and love and duty braided so tightly that sleep could never loosen them. Hermione, I remember. Ron, I carry you. Neville, I'll make it count. There were others who joined him. Luna Lovegood, her hair still the color of stormlit straw, wandered in and out of the Lantern's sanctuaries like a ghost of the old world. She carried a charm around her neck, made from a shard of her father's printing press. She said it hummed. When lies were near, Dean Thomas returned from exile and brought with him a network of Muggle safe houses, connected through enchanted radio signals. Kingsley Shacklebolt, once Minister of Magic, had gone underground and now led the intelligence wing of the Lantern. He spoke less now, his words honed to razors. Every message mattered. Every breath was risked. And Draco Malfoy, yes, even he, his way to them, gaunt and ashamed, hands shaking with old stains he couldn't wash away. Harry nearly killed him the first night. But Luna intervened. And Harry, weary and hardened, listened long enough to hear the one truth in Draco's voice. I didn't know what I believed, Draco had whispered. But I know now what I cannot accept. Time, in darkness, moved strangely. It stretched and folded. Victories were rare and cost blood. Spies were everywhere. The Obsidian Court had ears even in the silence. But Harry was building something. Not an army. A promise. A child, no older than 10, once asked him, "Why do we fight if we can't win?" Harry had knelt beside her, fingers curled around a wand, so scarred it looked like driftwood. He looked her in the eyes and said, "Because if we stop, the world forgets how to dream." That was what it had come to. Not prophecy, not destiny, just choice. Daily, difficult, sometimes damning choice. To resist, to remember, to risk. Then came the day the sky turned red. That, it was a signal. Part of a code Harry had developed with Kingsley and the Lantern's outer rings. If the wards over the Institute flickered and the blood spells wavered, the sky would react. It had taken years to craft. A crack in Voldemort's fortress. A breath in the suffocating dark. The time had come. The plan was madness. Infiltrate the moribund Institute during the ceremony of reforging, an annual display of magical loyalty, attended by Voldemort himself. Smuggle in disguised wands. Trigger the countercharms that would disable the unforgivable enchantments long enough for a direct assault. Free the captives. Bring down the tower. Harry knew the cost. They all did. He looked at his people, the children and the broken and the brave, and he did not promise survival. He promised meaning at the edge of the Forbidden Woods, where the bones of centaurs now bleached in the sunless light. They waited. Luna placed a daisy in her hair and said the winds felt like old lullabies. Draco gripped the sword of Gryffindor, gifted back to him by Neville's mother before she was taken. Kingsley whispered the names of the dead like a litany. And Harry Ashe closed his eyes. Not in fear, not in prayer, but in memory. The day Voldemort rose at the Institute, draped in robes of blackened starlight, the ceremony began. His voice echoed like thunder soaked in oil. Students knelt. Professors chanted. The wards shimmered. And then, the sky split. Red. Brilliant. Bloody. Burning red. A scream of light against the darkness. The resistance surged. They came like shadows set alight, racing through the cracks in the Institute's towering wards before the Obsidian Sentinels could regroup. The crimson flare above had already unraveled part of the school's protective matrix, and the Lantern, struck with precision, honed by years of failure and secrecy. For every fallen comrade, for every stolen child, for every silent night haunted by screams that had never reached the surface, they struck. Harry moved with purpose. The stone corridors of Hogwarts were gone. This place had been twisted from the bones of the old castle, but rebuilt with malice. The portraits were blank, enchanted canvases that stared back at you with your own face twisted in fear. The suits of armor no longer stood still but shambled, half sentient, bladed arms glinting with sacrificial rust. He passed through the Hall of Oaths, a place where new students were bound by blood to obey. The air was thick with memory of cries, muffled by magic, of children too young to understand obedience as surrender. He remembered this place. He remembered dragging out a boy, 11 at most. No wand in his hand, just pain in his eyes. That boy had died before reaching the exit, a curse striking him in the back as he gasped for freedom. Harry had never known. His name now spells flew, like shooting stars, red and silver and gold, clashing against curses dark as midnight. Dean Thomas held the western corridor with a team of spellcasters, weaving ancient wards taught to him by goblins in hiding. Luna darted between combatants, her voice a lilting song of confusion and calm that disoriented the enemy and brought clarity to the resistance. Somewhere near the central tower, Kingsley had broken the vault holding magical children deemed dangerous even for the Institute's indoctrination. Their magic burst free like a dam shattered. But it was inside the Tower of Concordance, the heart of the moribund Institute, that Harry would face his final trial. Voldemort was waiting. He stood before a throne of obsidian, the elder wand at his side, and his expression unreadable. His features had refined over the years, no longer monstrous in the way they once had been, but eerily still like a painting that forgot to breathe. The air around him hummed, thick with enchantments and bound spirits, and he seemed as much a statue of cruelty as a man. "You survived," he said without words. His voice rang out in Harry's mind like a bell of poison. "I allowed it." Harry raised his wand, fingers steady. "You allowed nothing." Voldemort moved, and the floor trembled. Number Preamble. No monologue. This was not the drama of the Great Hall years ago. This was war, swift and brutal. Their spells clashed like storms colliding. Voldemort's magic was cleaner now. Not wild but cold, efficient, honed by decades of study and the terrible advantage of governing fear. Harry dodged a spiral of green flame that twisted into the shape of a serpent, mid-flight, and returned with a disarming charm, so potent it cracked the marble walls behind his opponent. The Elder Wand did not fly loose. It answered its master perfectly. Voldemort's power pressed harder. Harry stumbled, the tip of his wand searing from overuse. He was not a boy anymore. His strength was not in prophecy or birthright, but in pain, in memory, in a will forged through loss after loss. And somewhere deep inside him, the fragment of Voldemort's soul that had once lived within his scar flickered, not dead, but quiet. He had never destroyed it, not fully. He had bound it, instead, years ago, to his own strength, not to use, but to understand, to know how to fight him. He called on it now, its power, but its memory. He saw Voldemort as Tom Riddle, alone in the orphanage, longing not for love but for power over love. He saw the Chamber of Secrets, the boy with hollow eyes whispering promises of eternity. He saw the night in the graveyard, the ritual of rebirth, the twisted form rising from a cauldron of bone and blood. And he saw fear, not his own. Voldemort's. "You fear me, because I was never yours," Harry thought. "Not even when you marked me." He reached into the bond, not to break it, but to shatter it from within. A golden light flared from his chest. Not a spell, not a curse, but something older. The echo of Lily's sacrifice. A thread still woven into his blood, dormant for years. The shard of Voldemort's soul within him screamed not in pain, but in recognition. And then, it fractured. The Dark Lord staggered. The Elder Wand trembled in his hand. Harry surged forward, not with a killing curse, but with a spell he had never dared use, until now, Reversio Cordis, a forbidden charm. Not for killing, but for revealing. Voldemort's form convulsed as the spell hit. Shadows burst from his body faces, memories, screams, every soul he had devoured to extend his life. Every Horcrux shattered now reflected through the prism of Harry's will. "You do not live forever," Harry thought. "You endure." That is not the same. The Elder Wand flew from Voldemort's grip, spinning high into the vaulted ceiling. Harry caught it. There was a silence. Not absence of sound, but the silence of breath held by the world itself. Voldemort collapsed to his knees, gasping. Not dead. Not yet. But broken. Behind Harry, the battle was ending. The Institute's walls had begun to fracture. The wards were down. The students who had been imprisoned, now older, some barely human after years of magical experimentations, tumbled into the light. Weeping. Luna approached, her robe stained, her eyes full of stars. "It's done," she said. "The rest of the towers are falling." Draco's team got the scriptorium. "Kingsley is alive." "Just barely." Harry nodded, the Elder Wand warm in his palm. It had no allegiance to Voldemort now. It would take none from Harry either. He snapped it in half. The sound echoed louder than thunder. The war did not end with a coronation or a parade. There was no crown waiting for Harry, no ministry waiting to name him minister, no house in Godric's Hollow ready to receive him. There was only rebuilding. The lantern transformed from resistance into restoration. Survivors became teachers. Children once trained to torture were taught healing spells beside Muggleborns who had never held wands. Draco led a tribunal of former pureblood families, seeking penance. Luna reopened the Quibbler not as a paper of fantasy, but as a record of memory, truth, and forgiveness. And Harry, he vanished again. He walked through the fields where Hogwarts had once stood, now a plain of wildflowers, and left his wand buried beneath the tallest tree. He visited the grave of Dobby, then the hollow where Sirius had died, then the edge of the forest where Hagrid had kept his hut. And then, one morning, a girl in her first year received a letter. It read only, "Remember your name. Remember your choices. Magic is not what you are, it's what you do." It was signed with a symbol, a lightning bolt carved in Ashdod, and somewhere in the world he had saved by choosing not to destroy it. Harry Potter kept walking, not as a savior, but as a man who had learned to fight, not for glory, but for tomorrow. But tomorrow did not come easy. Though Voldemort had fallen and the Institute had crumbled, the world did not heal in a single breath. The damage was deep, and some wounds resisted closing. The Obsidian Court had left scars on every part of the wizarding world. Families divided by blood politics remained fractured. The Ministry, now gutted and hollow, became a vacuum of power. Those who had profited from the regime silent collaborators, false neutral parties, and opportunists slithered through the cracks like water, seeking lower ground. Not everyone welcomed the return of the light, and so the lantern remained, not as an army but as a watchful fire, burning in hidden places. Draco Malfoy, whose allegiance remained suspect to many, took upon himself the bitter work of reparations. He attended every tribunal. He testified against Death Eaters who had once called him comrade. He refused to take his family fortune back until every galleon stolen or earned through terror had been redistributed. His mother Narcissa returned from seclusion to stand at his side. But Lucius was never seen again. Rumors placed him in the Shadow Vaults, or else exiled beyond the borders of the wizarding world. His name, a hushed ghost. Luna Lovegood created the House of Ecosa School, not for spells, but for unlearning the doctrines forced into young minds during the reign of the Institute. It stood not on old magical land, but in the ruins of a Muggle school, destroyed by the Ministry decades ago, during the Silent Purges. There, she taught compassion as magic, memory as resistance, and dreams as prophecy. Children who could barely speak their names when they arrived, left with songs of hope. Kingsley Shacklebolt, ever the quiet sentinel, took command of the Transitional Council. He refused the title of minister. Instead, he called himself custodian. He cleaned, he restored, he dismantled systems of control and built transparent ones in their place. It was he who oversaw the ritual of release where cursed magical items, forged in the dark years for domination and cruelty, were unmade in front of the public. The people watched as the dark mark was dissolved from the flesh of the unwilling, as tracking tattoos burned away, and as the ashes of the Elder Wand were mixed into the foundation stones of the new council building. But the soul of the world, as ever, beat in private hearts. Ginny Weasley, thought dead, had survived the battle in secret. Pulled from the rubble by centaurs who had retreated to the deeper woods, she returned, months later, gaunt and changed, carrying stories no one believed, and eyes that saw through every lie. When she saw Harry again, he did not run to her. He froze. The world had shifted too much between them. They walked together in silence through a field of high grass, where the wind whispered of chances lost and time stolen. They didn't try to love like they had. They built something else, quiet, close, a friendship so tight it hummed. Hermione and Ron were gone. That truth remained like a stone on Harry's chest every morning. Sometimes he dreamt them alive, Ron's laugh like thunder, Hermione's eyes full of fire, but the dreams always ended at the Great Hall, where their body had lain side by side. He returned there once a year, on the date of the final battle, not to mourn, but to plant seeds. Actual seeds, wildflowers, vegetables, trees. He never explained it. But slowly, the site of their last stand became green again. It was on the 4th year, after the fall, that the true test came, not from outside, but from within. A boy named Kellen Marlowe, born of no known magical family, rose from the House of Echoes with a charisma that reminded many of Dumbledore, and a gaze that reminded Harry too much of Tom Riddle. He spoke of balance. He spoke of the need to understand the dark, if one wished to truly resist it. He believed the unforgivable curses could be mastered without falling to them. Some believed him. He gathered a following, called them the Resolvers, said that the time of fear had ended, and what must now begin was integration. Magic without boundaries. Freedom without rules. It was seductive, especially for those who had been broken by the war and wanted their pain to mean something more than scars. Harry watched it all from the shadows. He was not the face of the new world, but he could not let this new hunger go unchecked. He sought Kellen out. They met beneath the shell of the astronomy tower, now overgrown with ivy. Kellen was tall, his skin pale like parchment, and he smiled with no warmth. He called Harry General, a name no one had ever used. Harry ignored it. They talked not with spells, but words. Kellen told him that love had failed to stop the rise of Voldemort, That compassion had not saved the Muggleborns. That Harry's resistance had required violence and secrets. He said, therefore, that power was not the enemy, only weakness. Harry listened. Then he said only this: that power without compassion, it was not strength, but hunger. They parted without a fight. But Harry began to train again. He revisited the deepest chambers beneath Gringotts, where goblin spell records showed ways to anchor memories in enchanted glass. He retrieved the mirror Sirius had once given him, now re-enchanted to reflect not what one wants to see, but what one needs to face. He wrote letters to the dead and burned them with phoenix ash. He practiced acclimacy, again, not to shield secrets, but to sift through trauma and hold what mattered. And then one night, the mirror of a rise stored deep in the lantern's vault, shattered. No thief, no magic, it simply broke. The next day, a letter arrived at the House of Echoes. It bore no signature. It read, "The dark has not died. It has only learned new words." Kellen Marlowe disappeared, and children began vanishing again. The lantern mobilized. The House of Echoes became a fortress. Muggleborns reported strange visitors in the night, men and women in grey cloaks, speaking of freedom, of power, of breaking chains. Some children left willingly. Some were taken. The resolvers had gone. Underground this time, Harry did not hesitate. He reassembled the old guard. Those who had aged, limped, grown tired, came when he called Dean Padma Patel, Hannah Abbott, Lee Jordan, Cho Chang. They came not as warriors, but as witnesses, as guardians. Together they tracked the resolvers to the Hollow Hills, a forgotten valley where the founders had once trained in secret. There, Kellen had built something monstrous, a new school. No walls, no rules, just magic in its rawest form, taught without conscience. They called it Solace, and it burned with stolen light. The battle was swift. This was no war, but a reckoning. Spells twisted the air. Trees screamed as they caught fire. The children, confused and crying, fled into the woods. Some fought back with curses so wild they nearly tore the earth open. Harry found Kellen in the ruins of a Blackstone circle. They dueled, but Harry did not seek to win. He disarmed. He deflected. He protected. And then, when Kellen faltered, Harry bound his magic not with death, but with memory. He forced him to see. Not with legitimacy, but with a spell crafted by Hermione. Before her death, a spell that made the caster's truth visible to the enemy. Kellen saw Lily Potter die. He saw Ron laugh. He saw Neville stand, sword in hand. He saw a boy in a cupboard under stairs learning that love was not given, but chosen. And he wept. He fled into the night. No one pursued him. Some say he died in the sea. Others that he wanders, nameless. But Harry knew he would return. Years passed. The world did not become perfect, but it became whole. Magic was taught in tandem with ethics. The House of Echoes merged with Hogwarts, which was rebuilt not in the image of the past, but as a place of many voices. A council of professors, chosen from all backgrounds, led it. The Sorting Hat remained, but students could now refuse its choice. House rivalries faded into memory. The name Voldemort was taught in history, not as a symbol of evil, but as a warning of silence, of what happens when fear becomes law. And Harry aged. He walked the world. Sometimes he visited moon towns and drank coffee beside people who did not know his name. Sometimes he appeared at Hogwarts to give lectures on love magic, or protection spells that required laughter as a component. Sometimes he vanished for months, but always, he returned. One winter, when snow fell heavy and quiet across the hills, a child found an old man sitting on the Quidditch stands, humming a lullaby. She asked if he was the Harry Potter. He said no. He said he was just a keeper of memories. And when she asked what magic he thought was strongest, he said this: to remember, to choose, to forgive. The girl smiled, and somewhere beneath the ground, in the roots of the school, the Elder Wand's ashes fed the soil where a tree grew taller each year, its bark dark and its leaves bright gold in the sun. It was called the Tree of Witnesses, and it whispered stories to those who listened. Stories of how darkness was not ended, but outlived. Decades passed, as quietly as snowfall on the castle's ancient stones. The wounds of the world, though healed, left their patterns in the soil and in memory. The children who had once grown up under shadow now raised children of their own. In sunlight, names once whispered in terror became lessons of caution and consequence. In the new Hogwarts, the portraits spoke gently, and the ghosts no longer wept. But even in peace, the work of keeping peace remained constant. Harry had become a myth to most. Students spoke of sightings a figure in a green cloak walking the northern corridor, a flash of lightning in the forbidden forest, a man with tired eyes and a crooked smile buying lemon drops in Hogsmeade. Some believed, most didn't. The world had moved on, and Harry had let it. Still, he watched. He visited the House of Echoes once each year, wearing no cloak of honor. Luna had gone grey, her eyes no less wide or curious. Together they sat on a bench carved from the wreckage of the old ministry entrance, and watched the students pass by. The world is no longer afraid of magic, she once said, but magic still remembers fear. Harry nodded, fingers wrapped around a mug of cold tea. And that's why we stay. On one such visit, Luna gave him a gift, a small wooden box, plain and unindented. Inside, a single silver feather. Fox, she explained. His final gift. When he passed, the feather drifted down into her hand during a dream. She'd kept it safe, waiting for the day Harry looked like he needed it. He never asked what it did. Years continued to unfurl like pages. The House of Malfoy, redeemed and rebuilt by humility, took stewardship of magical law. The Patel twins opened an intercontinental school where muggles and magical children learned side by side. Hermione's legacy lived in libraries, encoded in floating runes that taught not only spells, but ethics and empathy. Ron's laugh was stored in a bottle by George, enchanted to echo in the quiet moments of the new Weasley's joke emporium. Ginny coached the national Quidditch team until her knees gave out. Her hair turned white before her fire ever dimmed, and Hogwarts flourished under a headmistress named Aisha Patella Muggleborn, which with a booming laugh and wandless skills that defied record, the school became a haven not just for learning, but for healing. Its towers bore banners, not of the houses, but of memory. Students no longer competed for dominance, but for invention. Magic evolved. But one autumn evening, when the wind sang low and the owls were silent, the sky split once more, not red, but violet, threaded with the darkness that pulsed in the valley of hollow hills, long since grown over with moss and wild roses. The ground shook. Solace was waking. The resolvers had not died. They had waited. The children taken by Kellen Marlowe had not returned, but neither had they vanished. They had grown, far from scrutiny, trained in silence, in secrets passed from hand to hand like poisoned gifts. They called themselves the Fifth Flame, and they came not as destroyers, but as liberators. They claimed the world had simply changed masters, that magic still served chains, only now cloaked in softer words. They struck without warning. A massive surge of magic collapsed the outer wards of Hogwarts, not in rage, but in perfect calculation. No lives lost, no blood spilled, just silence, power, a message. We are here, and we are ready. The council convened. Kingsley, aged and cloaked in shadow, sent owls across the continents. Draco, now wizened and deliberate, returned from seclusion. Luna brought a map made of starlight and warned of cracks too small to see until they break. But one seat remained empty. Harry had disappeared again, until the morning of the third day, when the air shimmered with ancient wards reactivating. He walked into the castle not through the main gate, but through the kitchens, where the house elves wept quietly and bowed. He looked no older than before, though time had definitely carved its script on him. He carried no wand, only a staff made of phoenix, ash, and willow. Atop it, the silver feather gleamed. He entered the great hall and placed it gently on the table, where once the Sorting Hat had rested. "They're not here to conquer," he said. "They're here to finish the story." The council fell into silence. Ginny, now chief of international magical sport and public figure of hope, rose. "What story?" Harry's eyes were tired, but they did not waver. "The story that power wins. The battle for the soul of magic was not a war, not this time. It was a choice. The Fifth Flame offered spells that could rewrite grief, that could remove memory, that could force peace. They promised no more pain, no more fear, no more freedom to suffer. Many were tempted, but Harry refused. He went to solace himself, alone, but not unarmed. He carried every name of the dead in his memory. He carried 1,000 apologies. He carried hope that had no guarantee of success. And there he found Kellen Marlowe, not broken, not evil, but changed, older, sharper, wounded in the soul. They spoke again, as they had beneath the astronomy tower. "You believe in pain," Kellen said. "I believe in meaning," Harry replied. They did not fight. They shared memory. Harry opened his mind, shared every moment, the cupboard, the laughter, the depths, the hope, the choice to kill no one if another way could be found. the refusal to become what he fought. And then Kellen opened his. A boy abandoned by both worlds. A child stolen from the House of Echoes. A youth trained in paradoxed love, but left alone, their minds touched, and something changed. Not surrender, not victory, but understanding, solace dissolved. The fifth flame fractured, some vanished, refusing to yield. Some returned to the world and unlearned what they had known. Some remained in quiet exile, choosing solitude over power. And Harry, he walked into the forbidden forest one evening, without staff, without cloak. He never returned. Some say he joined Fox. Some say he simply lay beneath the roots of the witness tree and let the wind take him. But every year, on the night the stars burn brightest, a silver feather appears on the doorstep of Hogwarts, and beside it, a message written in hand, both old and gentle. The world does not need saviors. It needs rememberers and the students. The professors, the ghosts, the portraits, all of them stopped that day to listen. Because Harry Potter did not defeat the Dark Lord. He outlived him, and he taught the world how to begin again. Years rolled forward like tidewater, smoothing old bones. The war was no longer fresh, even in the memories of the oldest survivors. Kingsley passed away in his sleep under a tree, whose leaves whispered only truth. Draco's son, Scorpius, became chief arbiter of magical ethics, a role that had never existed before the war. Tasked not with punishing crime, but preventing it, Luna's map was placed in the ceiling of the Great Hall, where its glowing lines shifted with every secret dream of the students below. And yet, magic was never still. One year, in the days between winter and spring, a girl arrived at Hogwarts with a name no one had heard before. Her parents were Muggles. Her file listed no magical ancestry. Her wand chose her before she even touched it. Her name was Maeve. She was quiet, but the magic around her was loud. Portraits turned when she entered a room. Books opened on their own. She never levitated a quill. It simply floated. She claimed she had seen the witness tree before she arrived, in dreams. And that Harry Potter had spoken to her there. Headmistress Patel summoned her. No interrogation, just tea and stories. Maeve told her that she dreamed in spells words. She didn't know how to speak. And that, sometimes, she heard a voice saying, "You don't need to be ready. You need to be kind." At night, Maeve wandered to the edge of the forbidden forest, not to trespass, but to listen. She never crossed into the trees. She said there was someone watching, not threatening, just waiting. She became the youngest student ever to earn full wandless certification, not because she wanted power, but because she never used her wand. She said it slowed her thoughts. And then came the vision. During a defense seminar, the magical ceiling flared into silver flame. The words appeared in every mirror on the grounds, etched in dust and fog and water. The dark never ends, but it forgets, and it waits. That the faculty convened in urgent whispers. Prophets spun wild theories, but the students were calm. They had grown up in light. They did not fear, not like before, except Maeve. She went to the witness tree and buried something beneath it. A small satchel filled with old photographs, pictures of people she had never met, and a note that read, "I will carry this next piece." If someone carried the last. That night, the dreams came back. A forest of glass, a voice with no mouth, a child with eyes like frost and laughter like broken bells. A new threat. It did not come from hatred, or vengeance, or hunger for power. It came from absence, from forgetting, from magic itself, abandoned to long in peace. Maeve began forming what she called the archive. Not an army, a memory. Children from every house, regardless of blood or brilliance, met in the ancient catacombs to share what their ancestors had endured. They compiled stories, not in books, but in living spells, incantations, that carried pain, love, resistance, and joy. A spell that, when spoken aloud, reminded the world what had been lost and why it mattered. The archive grew, silent, steady, until, one day, a boy named Thorn, descendant of none, whispered an old curse out of curiosity, and the ground split open. From beneath the castle, where the original stones still bore the magic of the founders, something emerged, not a creature, not a person, a memory, alive and angry. It called itself Silence, and it spoke in voices that had been erased. It turned portraits blank, drained color from stained glass, muted songbirds, made laughter disappear mid-air. It walked unseen, except by those who remembered how grief feels in the bones. Maeve saw it, and she did not run. She stood in the center of the great hall, and let silence surround her. Others tried to cast spells. They fell flat, like breath against stone. Silence did not attack. It waited. Maeve closed her eyes and whispered the archive's first spell. A name, Harry. The room brightened. Not from light. From memory. The laughter of Ron Weasley. The voice of Hermione correcting a textbook. The flap of Hedwig's wings. The gasp when magic is first discovered. Silence trembled. Maeve continued. She spoke every name of the fallen, every act of courage, every sacrifice unrecorded in history. She conjured not light, but belonging. Not heat, but purpose. Silence screamed. And it shattered, not into death, but into echoes. It became the quiet we choose when we listen. The stillness between heartbeats. And the castle exhaled. From the walls came color. From the portraits. Joy. From the ceilings. Stars. Maeve collapsed. Not broken, but emptied. She awoke beneath the witness tree. At her side, the silver feather. And a letter. Written in old ink. Faded but clear. It said, "The story is not mine. It is yours. Tell it gently." She never claimed fame. Never sought praise. She became a teacher. Not of spells. Of memory. And once, when her students asked if Harry Potter was real, she smiled and said, "As real as any dream that teaches you how to wake." Years later, when Maeve passed on, they buried her beneath the tree. Not with a headstone, but with a whisper in the leaves that said, "Even the brightest light leaves behind warmth." And so, Hogwarts stood, not untouched, but unforgotten. And every year, on the night between winter and spring, the castle glows a little brighter, not from torches. From the stories whispered. From one student to another. Of magic, of pain, of love that never ended. And the man who walked into the forest, never to return because he had already become the path. Long after Maeve was gone. After the fifth flame was reduced to cautionary footnotes in modern spellcraft, the magic she shaped did not vanish. The archive remained. Not as an organization, nor as a building, but as a practice woven into wizarding culture. Every year, on the anniversary of Silence's dispersal, young witches and wizards gathered across the globe to participate in the whispering. They lit candles not to mourn, but to speak aloud the names and memories of those whose stories might otherwise be lost. The whispering was not mandatory, it was sacred. And somewhere within it all, Harry Potter had become something else entirely. Not forgotten, ever that, but transformed. His tale was told not as triumph or tragedy, but as continuity. The man who endured darkness not to conquer it, but to teach others how to walk through it. His lightning bolt scar was not a symbol of violence, but of memory, the reminder that pain and hope can live side by side. At Hogwarts, beneath the rebuilt astronomy tower, a door had appeared. No one enchanted it. No professor or headmistress claimed it. It was simply ... there. Black oak, smooth, silent, untouched by age. It could not be forced open. And it never asked to be. Until the day a young boy named Elian Osei walked by it, with his eyes full of questions, and no wand in his hand. The door opened. Inside was a room, made entirely of light, floating fragments of memory visible, but untouchable, moved gently through the space like thoughts inside a dream. Students called it the locus. Professors called it the room of return. Elian stood in the center, the light brushing against his skin like old song. And from the glow, a voice spoke. Not aloud, not magical, but clear. You are not alone. No one ever truly figured out how the room worked. Some said it pulled memory from the archive and transformed it into living witness. Others believed it was Harry himself, or what remained of him, poured into the space after his walk into the Forbidden Forest. A final spell of preservation, not of his soul, but of his lesson. What mattered was what followed. Ilion became one of the quiet ones, like Maeve. He didn't speak much, but he listened. His gift was empathy so deep it startled people. He could sense the hurt behind words unspoken. He never cast stunning spells. He taught protective magic that responded to intention, not aggression. And one day, he disappeared. In fear, not in violence, but in choice. He walked through the room of return and vanished into its glow. That year, the silver feather reappeared on the steps of the Great Hall, brighter than before. So the cycle continued. Children rose. They learned. They remembered. Not all became great spellcasters. Some never lifted a wand beyond simple utility. But their strength was in gentleness, resilience, and their refusal to forget. Outside the wizarding world, Muggles began noticing strange shifts in their lives, diseases easing, storms turning away from populated areas, Music heard only once, returning to the wind. They did not understand it, but something unseen was changing. Because magic was no longer hiding. It was remembering. And somewhere, beneath the roots of the witness tree, a quiet pulse beat on Dot. It was not Harry's. He was long gone. It was what he left behind. The truth that no spell is stronger than compassion, repeated Dot in hidden corners of the earth. New magical tribes emerged. In the deserts of Tunisia, witches crafted wind-borne spells that could mend fractured stone and bone alike. In the archipelagos of Southeast Asia, young seers developed weaving magic that read the ocean's mood and protected entire islands from ecological harm. In Brazilian rainforests, earthsingers bloomed healing gardens with voices alone. No central ministry ruled them. No single school dictated their traditions. But they were bound by one shared promise. The oath of light. It was spoken in dozens of languages, on parchment and air and carved stone. But it always began with the same words. We remember not for glory, but to guide. Those words came from Harry's last message. A simple letter found etched in frost by a child sleeping near the forbidden forest, long after Harry's walk into it. We remember not for glory, but to guide. Dot, as the magical world shifted into a new age, decentralized, diverse, and daring, some voices rose again in resistance, not with cruelty, but with fear. They feared magic growing too large, too independent, too kind. They wanted containment, classification, a return to control. They called themselves the Circle of Meridian. They wore no dark cloaks, no masks, no brands. Their spells were sterile, calculated, bureaucratic. They argued for licenses, lineage documentation, magical registration. Their leader was a woman named Syra Hollow, a descendant of both Muggleborns and purebloods. Charismatic, articulate, she claimed not to seek power but safety, and her first move was to close the room of return. She said the light inside was unquantifiable, and therefore dangerous. The door resisted, and that night, the portraits across Hogwarts wept. A rebellion formed, not loud but sharp. Professors, archivists, and students reawakened the Lanternaut as an underground army, but a global network of resistors, devoted to remembering what Harry fought for. They called for help, and received a reply from someone none expected. Thorn, that boy who once spoke silence back into the world. He was older now, scarred in soul and speech, but he returned to Hogwarts with a wand made of ironroot and a mind full of regret. He entered the room of return before it could close, and from it came not Harry, but Harry's voice, spoken by the light itself. Let them build walls. You build bridges. Don't let them close books. You write new ones. Let them fear what they don't understand. You help them remember, because memory is not a weapon, it's a torch. Thorn knelt and then rose, and the room grew brighter. In the days that followed, a wave swept the world. Students everywhere began creating witness trees of their own. Small ones, quiet ones, some magical, some not. They became gathering places for story sharing, song singing, spell learning, places where the oath of light was whispered. And slowly, even Syra Hollow softened. She was not evil, just afraid. She visited the room of return herself, and when she left it, she said only, I saw my mother there. I heard her laugh. I had forgotten what that sounded like. The door stayed open, not because it was defended, but because it was shared, and the magical world flourished, not without hardship, but without forgetting. Generations passed, wands changed, forms, some became rings, some tattoos, some whispers carried by Famal IRS. Magic grew stranger and more beautiful. The room of return remained until the day it vanished, not broken, not closed. Just. Gone. In its place stood a tree, not like the witness tree. This one bore silver leaves and a single fruit that glowed like a small sun. It needed no guards, because every person who saw it knew what it meant, that Harry Potter's time had ended. But his gift never had. Magic was not meant to save the world. It was meant to remind it that we are never alone, and never forgotten, and always capable of light.